When a billionaire's luxury car broke down on a deserted road, she never imagined the man who came to her rescue would be a humble single dad. But what started as a simple act of kindness soon led to an offer that would change his life forever. The rain came down in sheets that night in Harborview, a coastal town where most people knew each other by name. The storm had rolled in faster than expected, lightning flashing across the darkened sky, thunder rumbling in the distance. Most drivers had already made it home, but Daniel Cruz was still on the road, his old pickup truck groaning as it carried him back from a long day at the auto repair shop. Daniel was tired. His hands were rough and stained with grease. His back ached from leaning over engines all day, but he pressed on, eager to get home. At home was his 8-year-old son, Eli, probably curled up on the couch with the family dog, waiting for his dad to bring dinner. Since his wife's passing 3 years ago, Daniel had done everything he could to raise Eli on his own. It wasn't easy, but he was determined to be both father and mother, provider and protector. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. As he drove through a lonely stretch of highway, his headlights caught something unusual up ahead, a sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom, its hazard lights blinking faintly through the downpour. The expensive car looked so out of place on that old country road that Daniel instinctively slowed down. Standing beside it, clutching an umbrella that was no match for the wind, was a woman. Her posture was stiff, her movements impatient. Even from a distance, Daniel could tell she wasn't from Harborview. Her tailored coat, her polished heels sinking into the muddy ground, and the unmistakable air of wealth made her stand out against the storm. Daniel sighed. He could have just kept driving. After all, this wasn't his problem, and he was bone-tired. But that wasn't who he was. He pulled over, grabbed the toolbox he always kept in his truck, and stepped out into the rain. The woman glanced up, startled, as Daniel approached. She lowered her umbrella slightly, revealing a striking face framed by damp, dark hair. Her expression softened with relief, though her tone remained guarded. "Do you know anything about cars?" she asked, raising her voice over the rain. Daniel gave a small chuckle. "A little. I fix them for a living," she blinked, clearly surprised. Most people she encountered didn't work with their hands, at least, not in the circles she moved in. She gestured to the Rolls-Royce. "It just stopped running. I've been trying to call for roadside assistance, but no one's answering." Kneeling by the hood, Daniel flipped it open, ignoring the rain pelting down on him. "Well, looks like your engine's overheated. Nothing too serious. Give me a few minutes." The woman watched him work, fascinated by his calm confidence. Despite the storm, despite being drenched to the skin, there was something steady about him, something reassuring. He didn't fumble or complain. He just got the job done. Daniel's hands moved with practiced precision. Within minutes, he managed to get the car running again. The engine roared back to life, smooth and powerful. Daniel closed the hood and wiped his wet hands on his shirt, giving her a small smile. "There you go. Good as new for now. Just don't push it too hard until you get it properly checked." The woman let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." Daniel nodded, already walking back to his truck. "No problem. Just drive safe. Roads can be tricky in weather like this." "Wait." She reached into her purse and pulled out a stack of bills, crisp, fresh, and more than Daniel would make in a week. "Please, take this." "It's the least I can do." Daniel paused, then shook his head. "Keep it. I don't need your money. My son's waiting for me at home, and I just wanted to help." Her eyes widened slightly. People didn't usually turn down her offers, ever. Money had always been her solution to everything. Problems, gratitude, even guilt. But here was a man who refused it without hesitation. "I insist," she tried again, holding the money out. But Daniel stepped back, his voice firm yet kind. "Ma'am, I didn't stop because I wanted to be paid. I stopped because you needed help. That's all." With that, he turned and walked toward his truck, toolbox in hand. As he opened the driver's side door, he heard a small sound behind him. He glanced back one last time and noticed the woman staring after him, her expression unreadable, half surprised, half thoughtful. Inside his truck, Daniel started the engine and pulled back onto the road, the storm swallowing him once more. His thoughts were already on Eli. Whether his boy had finished his homework, whether he'd remembered to feed the dog, whether he'd fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him. But back on the roadside, Isabella Montgomery, billionaire businesswoman and one of the most influential figures in the country, stood in the rain, her luxury car idling beside her. She had spent her life surrounded by people who always wanted something from her. Her money, her power, her approval. And yet, a stranger in worn-out boots had just walked away after giving her the one thing money couldn't buy. The storm had passed by morning, of sincerity, leaving Harborview washed clean. For reasons she couldn't quite explain, still glistened with rainwater. She knew this and wasn't the smell of wet earth lingered in the air. Daniel woke up early, as he always did, to prepare breakfast for Eli before school. Their small kitchen was filled with the sound of sizzling eggs and the soft hum of the old radio perched on the counter. Eli, still groggy, shuffled to the table with his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning, buddy," Daniel said with a smile, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs across the table. Eli yawned. "Morning, Dad. Did you work late again?" Daniel chuckled. "Yeah, kind of. Helped someone out on the road last night. Fancy car broke down." Eli's eyes lit up. "Like a sports car?" "Better," Daniel said, ruffling his son's hair. "A Rolls-Royce." Eli's jaw dropped. "Whoa, that's like the fanciest car ever." "Did they give you a reward?" Daniel shook his head. "Nope, didn't need one." "Sometimes helping is enough," Eli grinned. "You're like a superhero, Dad." Daniel laughed, though inside he felt a small pang. Superhero or not, the bills piling up on the counter said otherwise. He pushed the thought aside. Eli didn't need to see his worries. Later that day, as Daniel worked at the repair shop, the sound of luxury tires crunching over gravel drew everyone's attention. Heads turned, and a collective murmur rippled through the garage. Parked outside was the same black Rolls-Royce from the night before, and stepping out, elegant and composed, was Isabella Montgomery herself. She was dressed in a cream-colored coat, her dark sunglasses shielding her eyes, but there was no mistaking her presence. Daniel froze, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag. He hadn't expected to see her again. Most people like her didn't give a second thought to small-town mechanics once the problem was solved. "Mr. Cruz?" Isabella's voice was calm, but it carried the quiet authority of someone used to being heard. Daniel cleared his throat. "That's me. What brings you here?" She removed her sunglasses, her gaze locking on his. "I wanted to thank you properly for last night, the way you helped me. It wasn't just about fixing my car. You didn't treat me like—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Like I was a paycheck." Daniel shrugged. "Didn't seem right to take your money for something simple." "Simple to you, maybe," she said softly. "But not to me." The other mechanics exchanged curious glances, pretending to work while clearly eavesdropping. Isabella noticed, then took a step closer to Daniel, lowering her voice. "Would you allow me to repay you in a different way?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Repay me?" "Yes." She glanced around the garage, then back at him. "Lunch, my treat. No strings attached." Daniel hesitated. Lunch with a billionaire? It sounded absurd. He wasn't sure what she saw in him, maybe just curiosity. Still, something in her tone was genuine, almost lonely. "All right," he said finally. "But only if you promise not to call it repayment." For the first time since he'd met her, Isabella smiled. A real, unguarded smile. "Deal." They met later that afternoon at a small diner near the harbor, one of the few places where Daniel felt comfortable. Isabella's sleek car looked wildly out of place parked beside rusted pickups and fishing boats, but she didn't seem to care. Inside, she ordered a simple coffee and pie, ignoring the stares of locals who whispered her name under their breath. Daniel sipped his black coffee, still trying to figure out why she was really there. "You grew up here?" Isabella asked, stirring her coffee. "Born and raised," Daniel replied. "My dad taught me everything about fixing cars. I run the shop now. Keeps the lights on. And your son?" "Eli," Daniel said, his expression softening. "He's 8. Smart kid. Loves building things. Reminds me of his mom." Isabella nodded, studying him. "You're raising him on your own?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. His mom passed away a few years ago. It's just us now." For a moment, Isabella said nothing. Her usual air of control seemed to waver. "I'm sorry. That must be incredibly hard." Daniel shrugged, though the weight in his eyes betrayed him. "It has its challenges, but he's worth every bit of it." There was silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Isabella found herself intrigued by his quiet strength. Most men she encountered boasted about their wealth or status. Daniel, on the other hand, seemed defined by what he carried, not what he displayed. "Do you ever feel—" Isabella paused, choosing her words carefully. "Like the world underestimates you?" Daniel chuckled. "All the time, but that's all right. I don't need the world to understand me. Just need to be there for my son." Something about his answer struck her deeply. For years, Isabella had been surrounded by people who only saw her as a symbol of power or opportunity. Yet here was a man who measured his worth not by money, but by love and responsibility. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When they finished their meal, Isabella insisted on paying the modest bill. Though this time Daniel didn't argue. As they stepped outside, she turned to him. Daniel, I don't usually do this, but could I see you again? He blinked, caught off guard. See me? Not for business. Not for repayment, just because I want to. Daniel studied her, unsure of what she was asking. But in her eyes he saw something rare. Sincerity. He gave a small nod. All right, we'll see. As Isabella slipped into her luxury car and Daniel watched her drive away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something he couldn't quite name. Over the next week, Isabella and Daniel saw each other more often than either expected. At first, it was casual. A quick coffee here, a short conversation after work there. But each meeting carried an ease that surprised them both. Isabella found herself laughing in ways she hadn't in years, while Daniel discovered that beneath her polished image was a woman who longed for something far simpler than her world allowed. But in Harborview, nothing stayed a secret for long. One evening, Daniel was walking Eli home from school when his neighbor, Mrs. Donnelly, called out from her porch. Daniel, you've been keeping interesting company, haven't you? Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She smirked knowingly. That fancy woman in the Rolls-Royce. People are talking. Be careful, dear. Women like that, they don't stick around for men like us. Daniel forced a polite smile and walked on, but her words gnawed at him. He wasn't blind. He knew the gulf between Isabella's life and his own was enormous. Still, it stung to hear it voiced aloud. Meanwhile, in the glittering world Isabella had come from, her absence hadn't gone unnoticed. At her corporate headquarters in the city, board members whispered about her trips to Harborview. Her trusted assistant Clara finally voiced what others had only speculated. You've been distracted lately, Clara said carefully as Isabella reviewed contracts. People are asking questions. Investors don't like unpredictability. Isabella set down her pen, her expression cool but her mind restless. Since when did having a personal life make me unpredictable? Clara hesitated. It's not that. It's just, Harborview isn't exactly where people expect you to be. And the man you've been meeting with, Daniel, Isabella said firmly. His name is Daniel. Clara nodded but pressed on. You know how people are. They'll twist it into something it isn't. A billionaire and a mechanic? They won't understand. Isabella leaned back in her chair, irritation simmering beneath her calm exterior. For so long she had shaped her life around others' expectations. What the media thought, what her investors wanted, what the public demanded. But for the first time, she was tired of it. That weekend, Isabella invited Daniel and Eli to visit her private estate on the edge of town. Eli's eyes widened at the sprawling gardens and the massive glass windows overlooking the ocean. Dad, this place looks like a castle, he whispered. Isabella laughed softly. Then you must be the prince today, Eli. The boy grinned, quickly warming up to her. Soon he was racing across the lawn, leaving Daniel and Isabella on the terrace with coffee in hand. You didn't have to do all this, Daniel said, scanning the lavish grounds. Eli doesn't need extravagance, I know, Isabella replied, but I wanted him to see there's more to the world than what he's known. And I wanted you to know that I enjoy your company, more than I expected. Daniel looked at her, caught off guard by her honesty. Before he could respond, Eli came running back, holding a toy car Isabella had given him from her collection. Dad, she has hundreds of these. It's amazing. Daniel smiled, but his chest tightened. Isabella was stepping into their lives more than he had anticipated. And while Eli's joy was undeniable, Daniel couldn't shake the fear that it might not last. That fear only grew stronger when reality came crashing in. A few days later, Daniel was approached at the repair shop by a well-dressed man in a tailored suit. The stranger introduced himself as Victor Hale, a wealthy investor and longtime associate of Isabella's family business. You're Daniel Cruz, right? Victor said, looking around the shop with thinly veiled disdain. I hear you've been spending time with Ms. Montgomery. Daniel narrowed his eyes. And who's asking? I'm someone who's known her world far longer than you have. Victor replied smoothly. Listen, let me be clear. Whatever you think is happening between you and Isabella, it won't last. She belongs in a world of power, money, and influence, not in this. He gestured dismissively at the garage. Daniel's fists clenched, but he forced himself to stay calm. If you've got a problem, take it up with her. Not me, Victor smirked. I don't need to. She'll come to her senses soon enough. Just don't get in the way. With that he left, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. That night, Daniel sat at the kitchen table long after Eli had gone to bed, staring at the stack of unpaid bills. Victor's words replayed in his mind. colliding with Mrs. Donnelly's warning. What was he doing, letting Isabella into their lives? She was kind, yes. Generous. And for reasons he couldn't fathom, she seemed to genuinely care. But how could a single dad with nothing to his name possibly stand beside a woman like her? The next time they met, Daniel's guard was up. Isabella noticed immediately. "You're quieter than usual," she said, setting her coffee down. Daniel exhaled. "I just don't know what this is, Isabella." You. And I'm just trying to raise my boy and keep the lights on. People are already talking. Maybe they're right. Maybe this doesn't make sense." Isabella's face softened, but her eyes held determination. "Daniel, I don't care what people say. I'm not interested in their approval. I'm interested in you." He looked away, struggling. "But what happens when the novelty wears off? When you realize I can't give you the life you're used to?" For a long moment, she was silent. Then she reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Maybe I don't want the life I'm used to." Daniel met her gaze, searching for any trace of doubt. But all he found was sincerity. The same sincerity that had unsettled her the night they met. It was then Daniel realized that this was no longer a chance encounter. It was something more, something real. But with realness came risk, and neither of them yet knew just how much it would cost. The days that followed felt like a balancing act for Daniel. On one hand, his life with Eli remained the same. Early mornings, long shifts at the garage, quiet evenings at their modest home. On the other hand, Isabella's presence was becoming impossible to ignore. She visited often, sometimes bringing dinner for them both, sometimes just dropping by to ask how his day had gone. At first, Daniel worried about how Eli would react, but his son warmed to Isabella quickly, delighting in her stories about traveling the world and listening with wide-eyed wonder as she described skyscrapers that touched the clouds and islands where the sand sparkled white. For Daniel, seeing Eli so happy was a gift, yet it also made his heart ache. He couldn't shake the fear that one day Isabella would leave, and Eli would be left with yet another hole in his young heart. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon when Isabella invited Daniel and Eli to a charity gala in the city. "It's not just about business," she assured him. "It's an event for children's education programs. I thought Eli might enjoy it." Daniel hesitated. He wasn't used to suits, champagne, or glittering chandeliers. But Eli's excitement at the idea was undeniable. So, reluctantly, Daniel agreed. When they arrived, Daniel felt every eye in the room turned toward them. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in shimmering gowns whispered behind their glasses of wine. Eli, though, was too dazzled by the ice sculpture shaped like a castle to notice. Isabella stayed close to Daniel's side, introducing him with quiet confidence. "This is Daniel Cruz," she said firmly whenever someone raised an eyebrow. "And this is his son, Eli." But the stares, the murmurs, the condescension, it all pressed down on Daniel like a weight. Later in the evening, as Daniel stood by the buffet with a plate of hors d'oeuvres he didn't recognize, Victor Hale appeared again. Well, Victor drawled, swirling his drink. "You clean up nicely." Almost convincing, Daniel's jaw tightened. "Not in the mood tonight, Hale," Victor smirked. "Oh, don't be so defensive. I'm just pointing out the obvious. Look around you. Do you really think you belong here? This is Isabella's world. A world of influence, money, and power. Not grease-stained garages and overdue bills." Daniel set the plate down, his patience fraying. "I'm here because she wanted me here. That's all that matters." Victor leaned in, his voice low and cutting. "For now. But when the headlines come out, when the investors start questioning her judgment, you'll see. You're a liability she can't afford. And when she realizes that, she'll walk away, just like everyone else." The words hit their mark. Daniel tried to shake them off, but they clung like oil on his skin. Meanwhile, Isabella was across the room, deep in conversation with potential donors. She noticed Daniel's tense posture, the shadow across his face, but couldn't excuse herself without raising suspicion. It wasn't until later, when they were driving home, that she asked, "You're quiet. Did something happen tonight?" Daniel kept his eyes on the road. "Nothing worth mentioning." "Daniel," she pressed gently. "Talk to me." He exhaled, gripping the steering wheel. "It's just that world of yours. The stares, the whispers, the way people look at me like I don't belong. Maybe they're right." Isabella reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Don't say that. I invited you because I wanted you there. Because you and Eli matter to me." He shook his head. "You say that now, but what about later? When it costs you your reputation, your business, your empire? I can't compete with that." Silence filled the car. Isabella's heart ached at his words. But she didn't know how to bridge the chasm of doubt between them. The crisis deepened days later, when the tabloids finally caught wind of their connection. Billionaire IRS spotted with small-town mechanic. The headlines screamed, accompanied by photos of Isabella, Daniel, and Eli at the gala. The articles dripped with condescension, painting Daniel as a charity case, a man out of his depth. At the garage, Daniel's co-workers ribbed him at first, then grew uneasy as business slowed. Some clients muttered that they didn't want their cars touched by the billionaire's pet project. Even Eli felt the sting. At school, a classmate waved a newspaper clipping at him. "Is that your dad? With that rich lady? Bet she's just using him." Eli came home that day with tears in his eyes. "Dad, are people laughing at us?" Daniel knelt down, hugging his son tightly. "Don't listen to them, Eli. They don't know us." But deep down, he wondered if maybe they did know something he refused to admit. When Isabella arrived that evening, Daniel was waiting on the porch, his expression heavy. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Her heart sank at his tone. "What is it?" He looked away, struggling. Whatever this is, it's tearing my world apart. Eli's getting hurt. The shop's suffering. People think I'm chasing your money, and honestly, I don't know how much longer I can fight it." Isabella's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Daniel, please, don't let them decide this for us. I care about you. About Eli, doesn't that matter?" "It does," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "But sometimes caring isn't enough." With that, he stepped back into the house, closing the door softly behind him, leaving Isabella standing alone in the fading light. That night, as she sat in her car, staring at the modest little home, Isabella felt a pain she hadn't known in years. For all her wealth, all her influence, she couldn't buy the one thing she wanted most: Daniel's trust. And Daniel, sitting in Eli's room, watching his son sleep, wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The days after Daniel ended things with Isabella stretched into a blur. For the first time since they had met, her texts went unanswered, her calls went straight to voicemail. The silence between them was deafening. In Harborview, Daniel threw himself back into work at the garage, trying to lose himself in engines and oil changes. But no matter how much he tried to focus, Isabella lingered in the corners of his mind. He could still see her face the night he turned her away, her eyes wide, searching, broken in a way that haunted him. At home, Eli noticed the difference immediately. "Dad," he said one night over dinner, "why doesn't Miss Isabella come over anymore?" Daniel froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. "She's busy," he muttered. Eli frowned. "But I liked her. She made you laugh. You don't laugh as much now." The words cut deeper than any insult Daniel had heard. He forced a smile for Eli's sake, but his heart sank. His son was right. He hadn't laughed in days. For Isabella, the absence was unbearable. She went through her routines, meetings, press conferences, dinners with investors, but everything felt hollow. She found herself staring out of boardroom windows, wondering if Daniel was eating dinner with Eli, if he still thought of her, if he regretted what he said. The tabloids hadn't been kind to her either. While Daniel had been painted as a charity case, Isabella was accused of being reckless, even slumming it. The media questioned her judgment. Investors demanded explanations, and Clara quietly reminded her that her reputation was at stake. But none of it mattered to Isabella as much as the thought of losing Daniel and Eli. She had spent her life surrounded by wealth and privilege, yet for the first time she had found something that felt real, and she had let it slip away. One evening, unable to stand the silence any longer, Isabella drove back to Harborview. She didn't go to Daniel's house, though. Instead, she parked a block away, watching from a distance as the warm light glowed through his windows. Inside, she saw Daniel helping Eli with his homework at the kitchen table. They laughed over something, and Isabella felt her chest tighten. That was the life she longed for. Not the gala dinners, not the corporate empires, but this simple, ordinary joy. Yet she also knew she didn't belong in that picture anymore. She drove away before either of them could see her. Meanwhile, Daniel's struggles were mounting. Business at the garage was still slow, and the bills on the counter grew higher each week. One evening, after putting Eli to bed, Daniel sat alone in the darkened kitchen, staring at a final notice from the power company. His hands trembled as he rubbed his forehead. "Maybe they were right," he whispered to himself. "Maybe I never should have let her into our lives." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. For the short time Isabella had been there, their lives had been brighter. Eli had smiled more, laughed more. And Daniel? Daniel had remembered what it felt like to hope again. The problem wasn't Isabella. The problem was his fear. The breaking point came a few days later when Eli, clutching his backpack, asked, "Dad, did I do something wrong? Is that why Miss Isabella doesn't come around anymore?" Daniel's heart broke. He pulled his son into his arms. "No, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong. This is all on me." Eli's voice was small. "But I miss her." Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of guilt pressing down on him. "I miss her too." In the city, Isabella faced her own breaking point. During a board meeting, Victor Hale made a snide remark about her little Harborview distraction, and the room chuckled. Something inside her snapped. "Enough," she said sharply, silencing the laughter. "My personal life is not your concern. What matters is this company, and under my leadership, it is thriving. If anyone here disagrees, the door is right there." The board fell silent. Victor smirked, but Isabella held her ground. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to justify herself. She had made her fortune by following her instincts, and her instincts told her that Daniel Cruz mattered. Back in Harborview, Daniel was locking up the garage late one night when he found a familiar car parked across the street. Isabella stepped out, her breath visible in the cold night air. "Daniel," she said softly. His chest tightened. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" She took a step closer. "I couldn't stay away. Not because of the gossip or the investors or the headlines. I don't care about any of that. I care about you. About Eli. And if you think I'm going to let fear take that away from me, you're wrong." Daniel stared at her, torn between the longing in his heart and the doubt still clinging to him. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is," Isabella said firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't want the life everyone expects me to have. I want a real one, with you." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw the same sincerity that had stunned him that first night on the rainy road. Maybe it wasn't impossible. Maybe, just maybe, they still had a chance. Daniel didn't sleep much after that late-night encounter. Isabella's words echoed in his head. "I don't want the life everyone expects me to have. I want a real one. With you." It was everything he wanted to hear, yet it terrified him. Could he really believe that a woman like her would choose a man like him? Not out of pity or impulse, but out of love? The next morning, while Daniel was making breakfast, Eli bounced into the kitchen. His eyes widened when he saw Isabella standing at the door holding a bag of groceries. "Miss Isabella!" Eli shouted, running into her arms. She knelt down, hugging him tightly. "I hope you don't mind, Daniel," she said softly. "I thought I'd help out this morning. Pancakes, maybe?" Daniel hesitated. The sight of Eli clinging to her was almost too much to resist. Finally he nodded. "All right, but don't expect 5-star ingredients in this kitchen." Isabella smiled. "That's fine, as long as it comes with Eli's stamp of approval." That morning turned out to be unlike anything Isabella had experienced. Instead of chefs in pristine uniforms, it was just her, Daniel, and Eli in a small kitchen with mismatched plates and a stove that groaned with every turn of the knob. She burned the first batch of pancakes to Eli's endless giggles. Daniel smirked but tried not to laugh. "You're not exactly ready to run a diner," he teased. "Hey, I'm used to having people cook for me," Isabella admitted, flipping the next one carefully. "But I'll get it right. Just watch." By the time they sat down, the pancakes were edible, barely, and Isabella wore flour on her cheek. But for Daniel, the moment was perfect. Seeing her laugh at herself, seeing Eli beam with delight, it was the kind of morning he had always dreamed of but never thought possible. Over the following weeks, Isabella made a point of coming to Harborview often. Not in a limousine or with bodyguards, but in a simple sedan. Sometimes with her hair tied back and no makeup. She sat with Eli at his school's soccer games, cheered louder than anyone, and even brought snacks for the team. At the garage, she surprised Daniel by showing up in jeans and rolling up her sleeves. "Teach me something," she said one afternoon, standing beside a car with its hood open. Daniel chuckled. "You? Work on cars? Why not?" she replied, grabbing a wrench. "If I'm serious about being part of your life, I should understand it." Her grip was clumsy, and she nearly dropped the tool on her foot. But she was determined. Daniel watched her struggle with a mix of amusement and admiration. She wasn't pretending to belong in his world. She was earning her place. Not everyone welcomed her presence. Some of the locals whispered behind her back, convinced she was just playing with Daniel's heart. Victor Hale, still watching from the shadows, leaked another story to the press. Billionaire heiress slumming it in small-town romance. When Daniel saw the headline, his stomach sank. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," he muttered, tossing the paper aside. But Isabella, instead of crumbling under the pressure, faced it head-on. "Let them talk," she said firmly. "I know who I am. I know what I want. And I'm not letting gossip decide my life." Her conviction slowly chipped away at Daniel's doubts. For years, he had believed that people like Isabella lived in another world entirely. But now, he was beginning to see that she was willing to fight to stay in his. The true breakthrough came one Saturday evening. Daniel had been working late, and when he came home, he found Isabella and Eli in the living room, building a fort out of blankets and pillows. "Shh," Eli whispered as Daniel stepped inside. "We're defending the castle from dragons." Isabella peeked her head out of the fort, laughing. "You're just in time, Sir Daniel. Grab a sword and help us." Daniel's heart swelled as he joined them on the floor, wielding a cardboard tube as his weapon. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of family, not just father and son, but something bigger, something whole. When Eli finally fell asleep inside the fort, Daniel looked at Isabella across the sea of pillows. Their eyes met, and in that quiet moment he whispered, "You're really serious about this, aren't you?" Isabella reached for his hand. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." That night, as Daniel lay awake, listening to Eli's soft breathing and replaying Isabella's laughter, he realized something had shifted. His fear wasn't gone, but it no longer controlled him. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where love wasn't just a fleeting dream. A future where the single dad who once fixed a stranger's car on a rainy night could finally have the family he thought he'd lost forever. For a while, everything felt almost normal. Daniel, Isabella, and Eli built a rhythm. School, work, visits, shared dinners. The quiet happiness of Harborview wrapped around them like a blanket. But the world outside their small town wasn't about to let them stay hidden forever. One morning, Daniel arrived at the garage to find reporters waiting by the entrance. Cameras flashed as microphones shoved toward him. "Mr. Cruz, is it true you're dating Isabella Montgomery? Are you using her for her money? Do you think a billionaire really belongs in a town like this?" Daniel's jaw tightened. He pushed past without answering, but the whispers followed him inside. By noon, several customers had canceled their appointments, saying they didn't want to be part of the circus. That evening, as he closed up shop, his landlord approached with a stiff expression. "Daniel, I've had complaints. People don't want paparazzi hanging around. If this keeps up, I might have to reconsider your lease." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. His business, the one thing keeping him and Eli afloat, was suddenly at risk. Meanwhile, Isabella was facing her own firestorm. Victor Hale had doubled down, feeding tabloids with stories about her reckless behavior and painting Daniel as an opportunist. Shareholders started questioning whether Isabella was too distracted to lead the company. At a press conference, a journalist asked bluntly, "Ms. Montgomery, are you jeopardizing Montgomery Hotels for a romance with a mechanic?" The question hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Isabella took a steady breath and replied, "My company is thriving. My personal life is not a distraction. It's a reminder of what matters most. And if that makes some of you uncomfortable, so be it." Her answer made headlines worldwide. To some, it was empowering. To others, it was scandalous. The backlash spilled into Harborview. One night, as Daniel and Eli left the grocery store, a stranger sneered, "Enjoying the billionaire's handouts?" Daniel's face burned, but before he could respond, Eli tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, let's just go." At home, Daniel's frustration boiled over. "This is exactly why I didn't want this. Eli's getting dragged into it. My business is suffering. And for what?" Isabella, who had been unpacking groceries, froze. "For what?" she repeated quietly. "Daniel, I thought you knew. For love." "For us," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't make the cameras disappear." Her eyes glistened. "So what are you saying? That you regret all of this?" Daniel didn't answer right away. The silence was louder than words. The next day, Isabella tried to ease the tension. She brought Eli a new set of books for school and offered to help Daniel with the garage's mounting bills. But the gesture backfired. "I don't need your money, Isabella," Daniel snapped. "Do you think I can't take care of my own son? That I can't stand on my own 2 feet without you swooping in?" She recoiled, stung. "That's not what I meant. I just wanted to help. Well, it doesn't feel like help. It feels like pity." The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Isabella's face hardened. "I never pitied you, Daniel, but if you're so determined to push me away, maybe you'll get what you want." She left without another word. Days passed with little contact. Daniel threw himself into work, but business continued to suffer. Reporters still loitered outside, gossip still followed him, and the bills still piled up. Every time he looked at Eli, who asked about Isabella less and less, Daniel felt the sting of what he had thrown away. For Isabella, the distance was equally painful. She sat in boardrooms and luxury suites, surrounded by everything money could buy, yet felt emptier than ever. Clara urged her to let go. He doesn't understand your world, Isabella. He never will. But Isabella couldn't. In her heart, she knew Daniel wasn't chasing her wealth. He was running from his own fears. The true test came one Friday night. Daniel was closing the garage when a group of paparazzi blocked his path, their cameras blinding him. One shouted, "Hey Daniel, when's the wedding?" Or is she just your sugar mama? Something inside him snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing the man by the collar. "You don't know anything about her!" he shouted. The cameras clicked furiously, capturing every second. By the time Daniel released the man and stormed off, the damage was done. The next morning, headlines screamed, "Daniel Cruz explodes, violent outburst over Isabella Montgomery romance." When Isabella saw the news, her heart ached. Not because of the scandal, but because she could see the pain in Daniel's eyes even through the photos. Both of them were being torn apart by a world that couldn't understand their love. And unless they found a way to rise above it, their story would end not with a happy ending, but with heartbreak. The scandal from Daniel's outburst spread faster than wildfire. News channels replayed the footage on a loop, the single dad grabbing a reporter, fury etched across his face. Social media mocked him, tabloids branded him unstable, and investors whispered that Isabella Montgomery had lost her touch. For a few days, Daniel kept his head down, refusing to answer calls, even Isabella's. He couldn't bear the thought of Eli seeing the headlines, so he avoided the television altogether. But the whispers in town were unavoidable. At Eli's school, one of the other parents muttered, "That's the guy dating the billionaire. Can you believe she'd pick him?" Daniel clenched his jaw, shepherding Eli quickly to the truck. But Eli, wise beyond his years, glanced up and said, "Dad, you always told me to ignore people who don't know us, so why aren't you doing that?" The words struck Daniel like a blow. He was supposed to be teaching his son strength, not showing him how to crumble under pressure. That night, after Eli was asleep, Daniel sat alone in the garage. The smell of grease and motor oil clung to him as he stared at the half-repaired engine in front of him. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly. "What am I doing?" he whispered. He thought back to the night on the rainy road, the moment he'd seen Isabella stranded, the way her eyes softened when he refused her money, the laughter they'd shared over pancakes, the warmth of Eli curled against them in the blanket fort. Somewhere along the way, he had let fear bury all of that. Fear of not being enough, fear of losing everything again. But in protecting himself, he had lost the one thing that truly mattered, the chance to love, fully and without apology. Meanwhile, Isabella sat in her penthouse, surrounded by luxury but feeling utterly alone. Clara set a thick folder of damage control plans on the table. "If you want to salvage your reputation, you need to cut ties with Daniel Cruz. Issue a statement. Put distance between you. The board will calm down, and Victor Hale will lose leverage." Isabella's eyes hardened. "No. I'm done letting other people dictate my life. I don't care if I lose investors. I don't care if the press mocks me. I love him, Clara. And I'm not going to abandon him because the world says he's not good enough." Clara hesitated. "But Isabella—" "No buts," Isabella said firmly. "Daniel's the one who showed me what it means to live honestly. If I lose him, I lose myself." For the first time in her career, Isabella Montgomery wasn't thinking about money or power or appearances. She was thinking about a small garage in Harborview, and a boy who missed her, and a man who had taught her the value of kindness. The next weekend, Isabella returned to Harborview, not with a limousine or a driver, but alone, in jeans and a simple jacket. She walked into the garage where Daniel was bent over a car. He looked up, startled. His eyes flicked to her, then quickly back to the engine. "You shouldn't be here. People will only make it worse." "I don't care what people think," Isabella said, her voice steady. "I care about you, about Eli, about us." Daniel shook his head. "You don't understand. I've ruined everything. The press, the gossip. It's hurting Eli. I can't let that happen." She stepped closer. "Daniel, Eli doesn't need perfection. He needs you. And you need to stop running from the life you deserve." He finally met her gaze, pain and longing written across his face. "What if I can't be enough for you, Isabella?" Her eyes softened. "You already are. You always were." The words cracked something inside him. For the first time, he didn't feel like the poor mechanic standing in the shadow of a billionaire. He felt like a man who had been loved, truly loved, for who he was. But before Daniel could reply, a car screeched to a halt outside. Victor Hale stepped out, flanked by 2 associates, his smirk venomous. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Victor sneered. "The mechanic and the princess. You really are throwing your empire away for this, Isabella?" Daniel stiffened. "What do you want?" Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I came to give Isabella one last chance. Walk away from this fool, or watch everything you've built crumble. The board's ready to push you out, Isabella. All I have to do is say the word." Isabella squared her shoulders. "Then say it, because I'd rather lose everything than lose myself." Victor's smirk faltered for just a moment before hardening again. "You'll regret this." He turned and stormed off, his threat hanging heavy in the air. After he left, Daniel looked at Isabella in disbelief. "You'd risk your whole empire. For me?" She smiled through the tears welling in her eyes. "For you. For Eli. For us." Daniel's defenses, built brick by brick over years of loss and fear, finally began to crumble, and for the first time, he let himself believe, truly believe, that love might be worth fighting for. The morning after Victor's visit, the air in Harborview felt heavier. Word had spread about the confrontation at Daniel's garage, though the details were twisted by gossip. Some claimed Victor had threatened to shut the shop down. Others whispered Isabella would abandon Daniel to save her empire. Daniel knew the truth, but the doubts still clawed at him. Could he really be the reason Isabella lost everything she had worked for? Could a man like him carry the weight of her world? Eli noticed the tension. "Dad," he said quietly at breakfast, "you look scared." Daniel looked at his son, startled. "Scared?" "Yeah," Eli said, munching his cereal. "But Miss Isabella isn't scared. She's brave. She said she wanted to be with us, so maybe you should be brave too." Daniel froze, Eli's words hitting harder than any headline. His son didn't need a perfect father. He needed a courageous one. And maybe courage wasn't about never being afraid. Maybe it was about fighting for what mattered, no matter the cost. That afternoon, Daniel made a decision. Instead of hiding from the storm, he would face it head-on. He called Isabella. "Meet me in the city tonight," he said firmly. "There's something I need to do." When Isabella arrived at the Montgomery Hotel's headquarters, she found Daniel waiting in the lobby, Eli by his side. Reporters swarmed instantly, cameras flashing, questions flying. "Daniel Cruz, are you destroying Isabella Montgomery's reputation?" "Isabella, are you stepping down from the company for this man?" "Eli, do you like your new rich mom?" Daniel's fists clenched, but this time he didn't lash out. He pulled Eli close, shielding him from the chaos, and marched toward the elevators with Isabella at his side. Upstairs, the boardroom was packed. Victor Hale sat at the head of the table, smug as ever. "Ah, perfect timing," he sneered. "We were just about to vote on removing Isabella from her position." Isabella straightened her shoulders, ready to fight. But before she could speak, Daniel stepped forward. "I need to say something," he began, his voice steady but loud enough to silence the room. Every eye turned toward him. The mechanic in worn boots and a plain shirt, standing in a room filled with suits and billion-dollar contracts. "I know what you all think of me," Daniel continued. "That I'm not good enough for Isabella. That I'm dragging her down. And maybe you're right. I'm not rich. I don't own skyscrapers or private jets. I fix cars to keep the lights on for my son. That's who I am." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But you know what else I am? I'm a man who works hard. A man who teaches his son to tell the truth, even when it's hard. A man who loves Isabella Montgomery not for her money, not for her name, but for her heart. Because when all the noise is stripped away, that's what really matters." The board shifted uncomfortably. Victor smirked. "Touching, but love doesn't run companies." "No!" Daniel shot back. "But honesty does. Integrity does. And if you can't see that Isabella is the reason this empire stands as strong as it does, then maybe you don't deserve her leadership." The room fell silent. For the first time, Victor had no smug retort. Isabella stepped forward, her voice ringing with pride. "Daniel is right. I've built this company on hard work and vision, and I will continue to lead it. Not because you approve, but because I've earned it. But understand this. If you force me to choose between this boardroom and the people I love, I will walk away without hesitation, because no empire is worth more than my family." Her declaration stunned the room. The shareholders exchanged nervous glances. Victor's face reddened with frustration. Finally, Clara spoke from the end of the table. I believe Isabella has proven her loyalty to this company time and again. And if she says love makes her stronger, not weaker, I'm inclined to believe her. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the board. Victor realized too late that the tide had turned. After the meeting, as the board dispersed, Daniel turned to Isabella, overwhelmed. I didn't mean to cause more chaos. Isabella silenced him with a smile. Daniel, you didn't cause chaos. You reminded me and them of what really matters. You stood up, not just for me but for us. Do you know how long I've waited for someone to do that? Daniel's throat tightened. I was scared, Isabella. Scared I wasn't enough. She cupped his face in her hands. You're more than enough. You're the man who fixed my car that night without asking for anything in return. And you've been fixing my heart ever since. Eli grinned, tugging at Daniel's sleeve. Does this mean she's staying, Dad? Daniel looked into Isabella's eyes, his fears finally dissolving. Yeah, buddy, he whispered, pulling them both into his arms. She's staying. The weeks after the boardroom confrontation felt different. For the first time in years, Isabella breathed freely. She no longer felt chained to the relentless pressure of appearances, deals, and numbers. She had faced her greatest test, and though Victor sulked on the sidelines, her company stood firmly behind her. But even more than her empire, her heart was safe and fuller than ever. Daniel's garage, once a lonely corner of Harborview, now bustled with energy. Word had spread about the mechanic who stood up to billionaires, and customers lined up not just for his skills, but for the story behind the man. Eli loved it most of all. Dad, he said one afternoon as they wiped grease off their hands, you're kind of famous now. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. Famous? Nah, I just fixed a car and told the truth. But Isabella, who was standing nearby, placed a hand on his shoulder. No, Daniel, you reminded people that being real is more powerful than being rich. That's why they admire you. Life began blending in unexpected ways. Isabella traded gala dinners for backyard barbecues, where she learned to flip burgers with Eli cheering her on. Daniel, in turn, found himself in glittering hotel ballrooms, awkward at first, but always with Isabella's hand in his. One evening, Isabella hosted a charity event at one of her hotels. Instead of dazzling gowns and diamond necklaces, the highlight was Eli standing on stage beside her, announcing a new scholarship fund in honor of single parents chasing their dreams. The applause that followed wasn't just for Isabella's generosity, it was for the picture they painted together. A woman who had everything but found meaning in family, a man who had little but gave everything he had, and a boy whose laughter tied them all together. Despite the new rhythm, Daniel wrestled with one last thought. One evening, as he watched Isabella tuck Eli into bed, he realized the truth. He didn't just want her in their lives, he wanted to make her officially part of their family. The next morning, Daniel asked Isabella to meet him at the old oak tree near the edge of Harborview. It was the same place they had walked together weeks before, where she had first hinted that her world was bigger than skyscrapers. When she arrived, curious, Daniel looked nervous. His hands, usually steady with wrenches and bolts, trembled as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Isabella Montgomery, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I've spent most of my life thinking I had to do it all alone, that it was just me and Eli against the world. But you've shown me something different. You've shown me what it feels like to have a partner, to have hope, to believe that love doesn't care about money or power. He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. So today I want to ask you, will you be my wife, my partner, and Eli's mom, not just in our hearts but in every way? Isabella's eyes welled with tears. For all the glittering diamonds she had worn in her life, none compared to the plain ring Daniel held. Because it wasn't about wealth, it was about love. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, laughing through her tears. Yes, Daniel Cruz. 1,000 times, yes! Eli, who had been hiding behind the tree all along, burst out cheering. I knew it! I knew it! He ran to hug them both, nearly knocking the ring from Daniel's hand. Together, under the shade of the oak tree, their little family began a new chapter. Months later, on a bright summer day, the town of Harborview gathered at a small church for a wedding unlike any other. It wasn't extravagant. There were no gold ceilings or celebrity guests, but it was warm, filled with laughter, music, and the smell of homemade food. Daniel stood at the altar, his eyes never leaving Isabella as she walked down the aisle in a gown that was elegant but understated, her smile radiant. When she reached him, Eli proudly stood between them, holding both their hands. The vows were simple, heartfelt. I promise to love you not for what you own, but for who you are, Isabella said softly. And I promise to stand by you, No matter how hard the road gets, Daniel replied. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the cheers that erupted carried out into the streets. It wasn't just a wedding. It was proof that love could bridge worlds that seemed impossibly far apart. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel held Isabella close, watching Eli dance with his new cousins on the lawn. Funny, Daniel murmured. All this started with a broken car. Isabella laughed, resting her head on his chest. No, Daniel. It started with a man who refused to let life break him, and I'm so glad I found him. He kissed her gently, the weight of years of struggle lifting from his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, Daniel Cruz wasn't just surviving. He was living. And together, with Isabella by his side and Eli's laughter filling the air, they stepped boldly into a future none of them had ever expected, but all of them had always deserved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.